Hey guys, this is Financial Fitness, and I have got a crowd today. I've got Mikey with Ironside Ranch, Nobody Special, and the Economic Ninja. How you fellas doing?
Doing good. Thank you.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk at the same time.
Yeah, no, we're all afraid of talking over each other.
I got them here because we're staring at a fertilizer shortage in the eyes that's going to lead to crop failures and food shortages. And we're going to wrap this conversation up with price controls, the same kind of thing that happened in around 1970, 1971. And before I get started, I want to plug our meetup. Saturday, January the 8th, 5 p.m. The exact location will be announced 24 hours before we meet up in Denver. The Honorable Judge Joe Brown, the Economic Ninja, Jim Lewis, Rob Keynes, me, Dave Kranzler, Nobody Special, and the analyst. He's going to be there as well. So we're all going to meet up and we're going to have a big time. It's going to be great. I hope you can be there. I'm going to put a link in the description below because I need to know if you're coming. So let me know in that link.
And Chris, we do have a location now. It's going to be in that link. We'll have it's a really awesome venue, and it's from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that.
That's cool.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I don't know which one of you is the most authority on fertilizer, but that's where I would like to start. And I'm thinking Ironside. What's up, brother?
Well, that's kind of funny because we don't use fertilizer. Ours is an all natural ranch, and so our fertilizer comes out of the back end of my cow.
Well, that's what I do.
To be that fertilizer spreader, just so you know.
Yeah, they work a lot better. They're a lot cheaper and they're a lot more efficient. So, and it's actually one of the reasons why we don't raise with it is because it's something that I can't control the price of. You know, it's kind of the same theory as like rental properties and stuff like that. You know, people not buying condos because they can't control the price of the condo association. It's the same principle. It's a cost that I don't want to add to my farm that I can't control. So we use natural fertilization through our animals and through rotational grazing.
It's the same thing I do with my chickens. I use a little bit of liquid fertilizer through drip tape if it needs a pop, but most of the time it's just chicken fertilizer, and then they're out there making eggs and crapping out fertilizer as we speak.
Yeah, and if you look at like polyface farms running through their cycles where they have the cows run through and mow it down, and then the pigs run through and root it up a little bit, and then they run the chickens through afterwards to kind of clean up and scratch things over. It's kind of a similar process. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's called mob stocking herbivorous solar conversion Oh man, what's that? I'm blanking on it now. It's a big mouthful of words that Joe Salatin came up with to describe it.
Nobody Special. You're familiar with the NPK side, right?
Well, honestly, I couldn't even tell you what that stands for. So I guess that answers the question. I've been studying the fertilizer story for a couple of months now. I guess around October, I first caught wind of it. And it all ties back to energy into this run up in natural gas prices, right? That when this energy shortage developed, when natural gas production started to decline, when prices in China in particular went really high, it really hit the fertilizer industry. The main ingredient in these chemical fertilizers that a lot of these big industrial farms use is natural gas. And then the conversion of the natural gas into the fertilizer is very energy intensive. So this energy price spike has driven up the price of natural gas and the price of the electric. So it's basically halted all fertilizer production in Europe. And with the spike in prices and worries about food inflation, you saw China stop their fertilizer exports. And then right about the same time, we had Hurricane Ida rolled through the States, took out a lot of the fertilizer production here in the States along the Mississippi Delta. So we've had all of these things combined on top of the existing inflation problem we've been suffering from all year. And it's really cranked up these prices of fertilizer. And, real quick before we did this meeting, I jotted down a couple of numbers. Anhydrous ammonia, this time last year, $487 a ton. Right now, $1,424 a ton. Diammonium phosphate went from 390 a ton, now 862 a ton. Potash went from 350, now 807. So, we're seeing more than doubling in these fertilizer prices. Put yourself in a farmer and a rancher's perspective, right? What are the input costs to his crops? He's got fertilizer, he's got energy, and he's got labor. And we all know the energy and the labor is going up. And now these fertilizer prices are going vertical. And farmers are having this decision. Do I order my fertilizer now? Do I wait for the spring, hope the prices come down, run the risk that maybe the prices haven't come down or we even have this shortage by the spring? And then what do? Do I cut back on my fertilizer application? Well, that's going to affect my yields. Do I plant something different that requires less fertilizer? So with this price uncertainty, a lot of the farmers here in the States, the big industrialized farmers are faced with this really difficult decision. Mackie, you just mentioned you're all organic, you use manure, and I'm seeing a lot of articles where a lot of these big industrial users now are looking at manure as an option if the chemical fertilizers aren't there in the spring. So, we could see a run on manure all of a sudden.
Yeah, you certainly could, and it's actually a valuable resource that a lot of these chicken farms and the CAFOs, the confined area feeding operations, could actually be harvesting and selling, whereas right now they're having to pay to have them disposed of because it's considered a biohazard. But when Chris was talking about like the NPKs, you're talking about the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The other part of that equation, the other additional number to that equation, you're talking about nitrogen fertilizer, which is the big ticket item, but you also have to have the phosphorus and the potassium. Those two substances, and I believe somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but those two substances I believe are mined, which means that you have increased costs on mining, you have mineral rights and stuff like that come along with it. But as the main fuel that we're using in mining operations is going to be a lot of diesel. We're running natural gas generators on mining operations, but lots of diesel fuel running those mining operations. And as that cost increases, so too does the price of the potassium and the phosphorus.
I know you were talking about a run on organic fertilizer in places that are like North Korea. They have to gather dog feces or whatever they can find on a daily basis and bring to the government so they can try to grow whatever they can grow. They're all starving to death over there. So that would be a run on fertilizer. A lot of what's happening in China, China's been getting flooded. They've been getting beat up a lot. And a lot of their natural gas production has been shut down, and it's really messed up their fertilizer production. I know Brazil gets their fertilizer from China. India gets their fertilizer from China, and they are absolutely begging. They don't know what they're going to do. The Brazilian president came out and said, we don't know what we're going to do. Get ready for food shortages, period. 1 out of every 5 plates of food comes from Brazil, and I didn't know that either. So this thing's kind of it's snowballing at kind of the worst time possible. I'm noticing at work, natural gas, that's what I've done for the last 14 years probably, is hook up natural gas wells. And it seems like they're dragging their feet. They're sandbagging. They've got these new wells and they're not turning them on. And then I'm building a big facility right now so that 6 wells can come into that can produce a ton of gas, and they're really dragging their feet. They're not wanting to work very much on the weekends, and and I think it's because they know that natural gas prices are going to, go to the moon, maybe. It all kind of correlates.
So something that Jack brought up was the costs of the different components of fertilizer going up. And what that is actually transitory hyperinflation. And I've talked about this, that we don't have, transitory inflation anymore. We're going to be moving into transitory hyperinflation and a very serious inflationary event. And, I do believe we'll see a deflation in some aspects of economies, but that is by definition, as far as how high these prices have gone and as fast. And actually, they've been sustained for a couple quarters. That's hyperinflation. Now, something that I like that Mackie brought up was that he does everything natural. He uses the reason for that as cost. What people don't realize is how important it is to let land rest. I did a study, a lot of studying in the past when I had my tree farm and I was starting my vegetable farms, and the importance of letting the land rest for a certain amount of time, because what happens is we strip the land of minerals through over farming. And a lot of men have a boron issue right now, and which leads to like a low testosterone issue. And I've learned that boron is one of those elements that get stripped out of the soil, and without letting it rest for a year and giving it a break, not letting those minerals come back is actually to our detriment.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Travis, and that's one of the reasons why these models for alternative agriculture or regenerative ranching have all come about. Is in a large way, it was to create a model that allows the land to rest and recover, allows it to absorb the nutrients, because it does take longer to absorb that nutrients. When you're dropping it out of the back end of a cow, it takes the land time to actually use it, takes the bacteria time to break it all down. And so allowing the land to actually recover, you end up with significantly higher yields than what you could get off of a traditional fertilizer. Gabe Brown proves this year after year. He's got a 5,000 acre ranch. I believe it's either in North Dakota or South Dakota. I can't remember now which one. But they've got a massive ranch up there where all they do now is this regenerative alternative agriculture. And he's got the highest income per acre of any farmer within a 1,000-mile radius of him.
Nice. That's awesome.
You know, Ninja, it's funny you should mention the crop rotation and the letting the land rest, because you know, when I was talking about a lot of the farmers are struggling with the decision to make in the spring, I'm seeing a lot of articles with reference that it seems like they're all trying to talk farmers out of changing their planting plans, because you know, agriculture, especially here in the States, has gotten so good over the years. You know, with the soy one year, corn the next, wheat after that, or the rotations, and you know, fine tuning the fertilizer applications. And the productivity has been so good because of that. But now with this fertilizer application, a lot of farmers are considering going from corn over to something like soybeans or wheat. Corn is the most fertilizer intensive crop out of the three big grains that we grow here in the States. Corn can't pull nitrogen out of the air. It gets all of its nitrogen from the soil, whereas soybeans can extract nitrogen from the soil. So soybeans is a lot less fertilizer application is required. And the concern is that a lot of farmers in the States may try to save on their fertilizer costs by planting more acres of soy this year, or those who do plant corn cut back on their fertilizer application. We get a lower yield. So we could create gluts in some markets and shortages in others.
Well, and the facts are that soybeans themselves have been so modified through Monsanto. That's another reason why you see them reacting better, less fertilizer, things like that, because of all that genetic modification. So I love what Mackie and other ranchers like him are doing, is trying to bring back normal farming, you know, the smaller operations.
Yeah, I mean, basically what we're doing is we're using the model of 150 years ago, and we're using modern day technology to make it a much more natural approach, and allowing that. I guess what we're trying to do is mimic nature, to put it simply. And this is what, if you get into the weeds on it, this is what nature does, is it puts a lot of animals on a small area of land and moves them around a lot. And that's why you got, you know, 500 years ago, we had 7 million bison running through the plains of Wyoming. And they were just, you know, they would devastate the land, but then they wouldn't come back to it for a year. And so it would give it time to recover, it absorb all the nitrogen, everything coming out of those animals. And herbivores are land healing animals, not you know, this whole idea that they're contributing to the global warming ideas and stuff like that. It's just a crock. Herbivores are what can heal the land, not what are detrimental to the land.
Mackie, have you experimented with any cover crops?
You know, we did actually this year for the first time. What we initially intended to do was to actually allow the natural seeds that are in our natural seed base here to come through. And what we ended up coming to is we came to kind of a hybrid model, something similar to what Joe Soliton uses, also what Gabe Brown uses. Gabe Brown uses a lot of cover crops. And so what we did this year is we did plant a bunch of cover crops to see kind of what would happen if it made a significant difference. And what we've found actually is the best cover crop that we can do as we're converting land and restoring land is actually just to feed the cows hay and allow them to waste the hay. They trample it into the ground. It adds a lot of carbon to the ground. They add the nitrogen to it. It slows down the nitrogen. It absorbs water and increases the organic matter of the soil to where what we found is actually that's about the best way that we can do it. So I'm not saying that we won't do cover crops again, but as of right now, I'm not planning on it. I may trial and error with a small, 5 acre plot of land next year and just see kind of what it does. But as of right now, no, we're not doing anything more.
I did one on I've done them 2-3 years in a row, and I don't remember the name. It's like a big radish. They're about that big around.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I'm blanking on. I can't remember the name of it either. I'm not a plant guy, but I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a great way of storing nitrogen in your soil.
Yeah, and the goal is there's a lot of people starving on a micronutrient level. We have a lot of diseases and just bone deficiencies and weird things because we're not getting the real food anymore. It's just you're shooting this NPK to it, and it's like a junkie. It
Yeah.
gets a hit and it grows and it stops. If you feed it with real fertilizer with real micronutrients, it will grow. My tomato stalks are that big around in
Yeah.
the springtime.
Yeah, and again, that gets a lot into the weeds of it. So I don't know if you want to go down that rabbit hole or not, but the nutritional value of our food has drastically declined since. It started about 50 years ago, but it can even be traced back further than that. But that's when we start seeing the health issues in our society also skyrocket, is when we start seeing less nutrition in our groceries. And one of the big reasons for that is when Monsanto was designing a seed for something like a tomato, they wanted that tomato to be able to be transported 1,200 miles because that was the average for what their food was being transported. It was going an average of 1,200 miles before it reached the end consumer, because it was coming off of these monocrop fields. And what that ends up giving you is that it has also a tomato that has the consistency and the taste of cardboard and has about the nutritional value of cardboard. So, and that's what we see with our lettuce. I mean, you look at your lettuce is basically cardboard and water, and it's not near as nutritionally rich as what you would get if you raise it yourself. The chicken eggs, these have been tested time and time again. Chicken eggs from pasture raised chickens have about twice as much nutritional value as a commercial chicken chicken egg that you would get at like Walmart.
So knowing that we've got a global fertilizer shortage, and we know we're going to have crop failures and smaller crops and different crops, like nobody was special was saying, what does that do for inflation? How does that work? Because it seems like it would make food skyrocket, supply and demand.
So I'll answer this. So obviously it does. That's the short answer. But the thing that I want people to understand, it doesn't just affect fresh foods. It affects all kinds of foods. Prepackaged foods is one thing it really is going to affect. And it's going to take a little bit of time for those prices to start to expand. I did a story the other day where Kraft and Heinz was coming out and saying that they're expecting in January to increase their prepackaged foods upwards of 20%. What's interesting is a box of Kraft mac and cheese, that only means it's going to go up like 50 or 60 cents. But on a percentage basis, that's massive. What I wanted to throw out there is one solution, because everybody wants a solution. And right now is the time. And I have a friend, I'll give a shout out to Wade. He has a small container garden in his apartment, and he's got it right outside his balcony. And it's about, 4 foot by 5 foot. And it's, literally on an apartment balcony, about a foot deep of nice soil. And he's starting to learn how to compost and start to make his own fertilizer. And because the facts are, even though you can't make all the food because of where you live, you can make something. And I think that is incredibly, incredibly valuable, especially like if you have the room to start really composting, you are saving the landfills and you are doing something very vital right now for yourself and the environment.
Well, you're right. And I'm going to have people in the comments say, we don't need to use fertilizer anyway, the bagged NPK. But the problem is the guy that created that won a Nobel Prize. That's how we feed the masses, is with fertilizer. And all this composting and manure and all this is really good, but that's not going to get us nowhere near where we need to be to avoid starving.
So one of the problems that we're running into now with this, Chris, is that basically, and you said it best before, is it's basically a crack addict now. So the whole land has been this crack addict that we've given all this NPK to over the last, 50, 70, 80 years. And so that NPK has been pumped in there. And then now, if you were to turn around next year and try to get that soil to produce something on organic, all you'd end up with a bunch of dog fennel and broom grass. You get nothing out of it because the fertility is not there. That fertility takes time to build, and over time it's a longer term solution. But just like you go through withdrawal periods, if you were to be put into rehab overnight and go cold turkey, you have similar issues with the land. And so Gabe Brown talked about this in one of his presentations a couple of years ago, is that when they converted their land, which had been traditionally farmed for decades, when they converted it, they had to do it a little bit at a time. They couldn't do it all at one time. It was 100 acres here, 200 acres, and then maybe a 1,000-acre land to let it rest for a year. And it takes time. And so the whole process of it you're absolutely right, it cannot be done overnight. Longer term, I think that a natural solution is probably going to be in the realm of what needs to happen. But again, there's no way to do it tomorrow.
Ninja?
So I think there are amazing breakthroughs in both aqua and hydroponics. I'm seeing huge breakthroughs, and all the science is really coming from the weed growers all over the country. And it is absolutely amazing. You know, we know what fish emulsion does as far as the health of a garden and soil. And now we're seeing, like with, aquaponics, the fish, manure, essentially fish crap, feeding those plants. And I think it's absolutely phenomenal. I'm building one this year. I've already got all the equipment. I can't wait to build one. And the yields that are coming out of these little farms are amazing.
Yes, Ninja. So we were actually planning on putting one up on our farm here this spring. So now I've got to be able to beat you and get my videos out before you do.
Good luck with
Good
that
luck.
one.
Yeah.
He posts like 3 videos a day, man. I can't keep up.
I will outwork you.
You know, I've looked into aquaponics too, and one of the big benefits that we haven't even touched on this subject, that's the resource, you know, we fight over in 20 years or 30 years, but aquaponics, the big benefit is water consumption. Believe it or not, the amount of yield per unit of water consumed is much lower with aquaponics. I mean, you wouldn't think so because you have fish tanks full of water, but exactly, you know, what the crops pull out of the tank is much lower versus irrigating a field, and the amount of water that just seeps into the soil or runoff. Aquaponics
About
is a much
2%.
lower water consumption application also.
Never thought of that.
There's
Yeah,
something
it's-
so cool about those floating lettuce beds. I mean, I just think it's
Yeah.
so exciting. And you're watching those pipes with a little, I mean, it's like an amazing science experiment. And then there are people that are actually raising fish to eat as well in these huge tanks.
Yeah, you can also raise crawfish in them too. If you put crawfish in the sump tank, it's kind of neat. That's what we're planning on doing with ours, just putting the crawfish in the sump tank and then raising something like tilapia or whatever in the actual raising beds on it. So it's kind of
wow.
neat. But it takes about 2% of the water of traditional agriculture. It's about 2% as much water as what traditional agriculture would require.
I may have to fly out there, see your system, and then eat a ribeye of yours from your ranch.
You are always welcome.
Yeah, I don't know how long crawfish would make it around here.
Oh man.
So let's move on to and I know Ninja, you don't remember much from the 70s other than your big wheel.
I don't remember what I did yesterday. I mean, I had an awesome big wheel though.
I think in 1970 or 1971, the CPI went up to around 6. But when this was implemented, when the price controls were implemented by Nixon, it was like 4. The CPI was like 4. And, they take credit for it working, whether it did or not. I'm not really sure. Something worked. What's that going to do besides screw up production and have crappier goods?
Hold on real quick. So CPI was actually a lot higher than 6.8. So 6.8 probably happened around 1982 or 83. In 1980, we were looking at like 13.5% inflation. So what's really interesting about all the news headlines, sorry to jump in, Chris, but they're talking about, we haven't seen inflation like this in, 30 years or 40 years, right? The problem is that number is when inflation was actually coming down, and we're still getting worse. So pretty soon the headlines are going to say the worst in 41 years, 42 years. And that's the scary part. So keep going with your question. I just want to clarify that.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because everybody that's watching this video needs to go to John Williams' Shadow Stats. They've been manipulating the CPI. It's an absolute lie, and you need to see exactly what it is. And you don't really know because they've changed it so much, but it will open your eyes to what it actually is. And I think it's way closer to 20 than 6.2 or 8 or whatever they're saying. Anyway, I'm trying to say, what do you think?
Real quick, I just want to throw off a couple quick, really interesting facts. This is from the Federal Reserve. In 1917 and 1918, the CPI was at 17.5%. Now, I don't want to throw out the special word that's going to challenge your video, but a very interesting situation happened around 1918 that led to the Depression of 1920, which led to money printing, the Roaring 20s. You get my point. Now we jump to from after the Great Depression, the highest we saw was like 10%. And then we get to the 70s, right? And even in the 50s, we were at a negative CPI number. But real quick, let me show you the 1970. So 79, we hit 11%. What's interesting is in 78, we were at 7.6%. So you could see a massive jump, right, in 1 year. And I think that's what we're about to see, that jump from 6.8 to about 10 to 12% in Q2 or Q3 of 2022. But then check this out. 1980 is when it topped at 13.5%. And then it started to fall to 10% in 1981, 6% in 82. Okay, so just to give a little bit of clarification on how fast this can happen and come down, but we're still talking about a 4-year scenario. I don't think this one's going to last 4 years because of the amount of debt we have, but just wanted to give a little clarification. So we are repeating literally almost 100 years later what happened in 1918.
You know, if I could throw one more thing on top of what you just said, Ninja, the commodity boom of the 1920s caused a lot of rampant and uncontrolled agriculture here in the US. A lot of people got into farming who had no business in it, overfarmed the land, paid no attention to the health of the soil like Mac does. And we got the Dust Bowl in the 1930s.
That's
that
right.
made the Depression a whole heck of a lot worse. And, you know, we were just talking about how these commodity prices in the fertilizer could cause farmers to mess with a very fine-tuned system of production that's gotten very good over the years and now possibly changing planting plans. You know, it seems like history is really repeating itself in a lot of ways right now.
And let me throw out one more thing, referring to the Dust Bowl back in the 30s. There were plans to incentivize, they incentivized farmers not to grow or to grow specific things. That is happening now. It's been going on for multiple decades. There is a Dust Bowl of this era going on, and that's why we only have a certain amount. Literally, farmers can get paid literally to not grow. And that's something people don't talk about a lot about.
Yeah.
Mackie, do you know anything about that?
Sorry,
I guess
I'm
he can
muted
hear
when you
us.
went off. So yeah, thanks for the heads up.
Nobody
I
knew
know
we-
a little bit about it. It really only comes into play when you have really large plots of land, and so it's not something that I've dealt with personally. We dealt with it when my dad was looking at buying some land years ago that would have fallen into that category. And the reason it's all done is it's done to try to make some type of land conservation and area and to encourage kind of natural regrowth of the properties. And it's done in a large part because the people that want to promote some type of green living really don't know what they're doing, and so they're keeping farmers off of it. And the whole idea that man cannot help but destroy the land, where really what we should be doing is trying to say, okay, how can we be good stewards of our land, and especially organic farmers and regenerative ranchers and alternative agriculture. That subsection of farming is our stewards of the land. And so when you look at things like that, our land is producing more for the wildlife than what any acre or 20 acres around us that's not being maintained, that's in one of those, I forget what they're called, but one of those subsidy programs. We're going to have significantly healthier wildlife on our property than they will, simply because we're being stewards of the land and encouraging growth.
So do you want to mention anything about price controls? How likely is that?
Very.
What is y'all's end of next year?
I have no clue on a time frame, but at this point, everyone's losing their minds in the government. And that would be one more way that people can buy votes, by saying, hey, we're going to control these prices. It's like the same kind of thing. Hey, we're going to make these rich people pay more taxes. And what the end user has no clue about is price controls could completely cause shortages, because a lot of growers go, the heck with this, or suppliers, if you're going to control my price and destroy my margins, I'm closing my doors, and it leads to a much larger problem. Price controls only are happening at the end of a civilization. If you see price controls in America, you literally better be pulling, and this is not financial advice, blah, 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 not, I'm just a dude with a brock and a dream. Run for the freaking hills financially, because you can watch that everywhere. Turkey's doing it, Venezuela's sweet. How's that working out for them?
Dumpster diving, a nation of dumpster diving. That's what it ended up with, because you put your producers out of business with price controls. The solution to shortages is higher prices. If you outlaw higher prices, then it's institutionalized shortages. That's what you end up with. And, we've already seen politicians, I'm not going to mention any of them, but certain politicians who love to get their name in the press, they're already going after grocery trains and food producers and demanding information and Twitter storms and everything. You can already see they're heading towards price controls. It's not going to end well.
It's
Well,
going to be.
it's the only solution for them to actually, because without price controls, they have to be willing to say, hey, sorry guys, we screwed up. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I've never seen that from the Hill on either side of the political spectrum. I haven't seen that spectrum on the Hill. So, I mean, the only way for them to not do it is to simply say, hey, we screwed up. We gave out all this money. We've taken out all this debt, and we've had this massive hyperinflation that we're pursuing right now. And the only way to get this back under control is to put the price controls in there, because the producers have to keep raising the prices, in which case Washington has to keep coming down and say, oh, it's the greedy corporations. They're just raising prices because of corporate greed.
Actually, Mackie, all they have to do is change the price of gold, take it to the dollar and say, we're not going to spend it anymore. That's actually all they have to do. It would be amazing. The dollar would run up in value, but the problem is they wouldn't be able to spend more money and buy our stuff from us.
Yeah, 100% right.
No.
There's one other wild card in this race that it's worth mentioning, and I don't want to get into the politics of it, but geopolitically, there's a lot of risk in this area right now too. If things in Eastern Europe were to light off, Ukraine is the 5th largest producer of corn, and I think the 7th or 8th largest producer of wheat in the world. Not to mention all the natural gas that flows through the Ukraine. If things ever light off there, you could see less farm output. And you could see the natural gas problem in Europe, which is really what's behind this fertilizer problem. You could see that escalate even further. And then, the way conflicts tend to spring up off of each other, one feeds off another. If something were to happen in the Middle East because of that affects energy prices even more. I mean, the geopolitical risk could take this inflation problem and this fertilizer problem and this natural gas problem and just blow it up out of control even worse there. So there's really a lot of risk in the food situation right now. There's a lot of stories. There's a lot of moving parts that you need to keep an eye on.
And that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep bringing this kind of information. I'm going to always have these kind of like-minded people around me, because this is the kind of, because, Ninja with his 1918 deal, that really had me thinking, I don't want to talk about it a lot, but they didn't take any medicine back then neither. They just, and it was the real deal too. But you pick up on these little things in these conversations. Is there anything I've missed about fertilizer that we need to talk about? Or I know we're going to need to talk about food shortages some more. I mean, that's going to be part of this thing as we get into it. Is there something anybody'd like to say before I let everybody go?
Well, I'd just like to say, Chris, that as far as food shortage goes, it looks like we have this kind of perfect storm coming in to create more food shortages. We have the hyperinflation that we talked about. We have price control. We didn't even talk about the death fluid shortage, which is substantial when you consider that all modern day agricultural equipment is required to use DEF, not to mention it's used in the manufacturing of all those fertilizers that we were talking about. So everything that's grown out of the ground is going to be getting more expensive, because we have this kind of perfect storm of systems coming in here to say we're going to jack up the price on the food.
Well, here, I will add this. I think it's important to have food storage, water filtration, things like that. You don't have to go crazy, but this is the biggest reason. You will lose your mind if you can't feed yourself. If you're trying to feed your family, you will not be able to take advantage of the amazing opportunities coming because of a collapse in the economy, okay? We can't change the way the governments have screwed up the spending. What we can do is warn everybody to be prepared. And then when this happens, we're gonna take the mountain. We're gonna take back our land. We're gonna buy up as much stuff as we can, and then we're gonna be good stewards of it. And I think that's so important. That's why you need to have some emergency food. And I'm gonna be honest with you, we're all gonna be on the Brandon diet here pretty soon, so we'll all be losing weight. We'll look like Chris.
All right, guys, thank you for coming on. This has been real. I guess that's it. I appreciate it. This is Financial Fitness. I will see you tomorrow. Where's the button? Where's the button?
Hit the button, Max.
This is the shot of the news guys stacking their paper over and over again, waiting.
I
for the
shouldn't
camera.
I'm just gonna have, I'm gonna have to
That's
end the
funny.
meeting. I don't know where the button's at. It's gone. Later, guys.